to the Clemson Dubcast. It is Wednesday, August 21st. I am not good at math, but I think the opener in Atlanta is 10 days away as we speak. It has been an enormously busy 3 weeks covering camp and all that, all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Paul Strelo and I been on top of it, and that's going to continue moving into game week. So never a better time than now to sign up for TigerIllustrated.com if you aren't already a subscriber. My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse, and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's PARHAM law.com. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Solero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Solero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Solero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Solero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Solero at solerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. Okay, a couple of weeks ago, reached out to Jeff Scott to say, hey, the last time you were on the podcast was about a year ago, so we'd love to have you back if you have the time. A few days later, he texts and says, hey, what would you think about having both me and my father, Brad Scott, on? The immediate answer was, yes, please. What a trip down memory lane this is for father and son. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think you will too. Here we go. Okay, honored to be joined by Brad Scott and Jeff Scott. And I got to say, I haven't seen either of you in years, but both of you look younger. And
we'll take that.
There's a joke here about being away from college football for currently.
I think it did give me all this gray hair, though.
Well, I guess first of all, update everybody on your daily lives. Jeff, you've been a bit in the limelight recently with your real estate business, but Brad, I want to start with you because you've been more in the shadows. So just tell me about life as a granddad, being back in Clemson, and just what your routine is like these days.
Yeah, so this fall, I kind of think maybe in the summer, because officially July the 1st of a few years ago, this will be my third year officially retired. And so I'm kind of getting used to that, but I guess more importantly, my wife's getting used to me being around a lot. And you know how that is. The old saying about wife's definition of retirement is twice the husband and half the pay. And but you know, life's been good. Of course, we've been back now this second year, I think, in Clemson, and I'm enjoying being a granddad for sure. That's the reason they call them grandchildren. And so we just love that and enjoy that weekly, that we get to see the kids and do stuff with Jeff and Sarah, of course. But I've been playing a little more golf than you know, normally when you're coaching, you just play in these tournaments or these fundraising charity events, and, you know, it's a little different. You just swing and talk a lot of football. So now I'm actually in a little group that plays a couple times a week. So I'm enjoying that. And, you know, I think, you know, I coached for 40-something years. Now I'm getting coached for the last 2 or 3 years by my wife. She's breaking me into the routine, but it's been great. I've enjoyed it, and certainly glad to be back here in Clemson.
both of you know what it's like to be in the middle of August camp, getting ready for a season. Having been around it a long time, I can sort of see the look on the coaches' faces and just the strain that doesn't even have to be verbalized. You can just feel it. Do both of you look at each other this time of year and say, boy, this is a lot easier?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, this time of year getting ready, again, it'll be a time where Dad and I are out on the golf course and, enjoying, playing some golf and saying, hey, we can't wait for the football season and looking forward to that opener. And it's definitely a different maybe frame of mind than when you're in the middle of getting your team ready but the fact that, he did it for 42 years, I did it for 20 years. We've got plenty of memories of that, and we'll be excited to watch the games. But, there's no doubt it's definitely a different summer when you're not coaching as compared to when you're on staff getting a team ready.
This is for both of you, but I guess it's self-evident what you miss least about being in a program. But I asked Thomas Austin this, I guess, about a month ago when I had him on. What do you miss the most?
Yeah, for me, just probably the daily interaction with the players and the coaching staff. They're really your family. You put a lot of hours in, and things have, even changed to a degree that I'm not sure they're not putting more hours in even than what we did many years ago. But you always enjoyed as an assistant coach your room. That would be your position that you coached. And for me, most of the time here at Clemson, it was offensive line. So, you had about 16, 17 guys that you look forward to maybe investing a little bit in their lives every day, but at the same time helping them through issues, helping them if they're a freshman become a sophomore and so forth. And so that daily interaction with them and also their parents. But, the fun of competition, of practice, seeing youngsters come in, as freshmen, just trying to figure it all out, and then see them 3.5, 4 years later, maybe some 5, graduating, earning that degree, the pride in the family, the look in their eyes. That was some of the rewards that you get off the field. The scoreboard always shows a score, and that's how fans judge a program or a team or coaches. But there's so many other things that go on that don't show up on the scoreboard. That is really, I think, what draws you into the profession, and those are friendships and mentorships that you'll have for a lifetime. So that's probably what I might miss the most. But the preparation you were just talking about, that goes hand in hand. You got to love it and you work in it, but it's a different kind of a grind. I'm sleeping a little bit better now, knowing that I'll just be watching the game at 12 noon here in a couple of weeks on TV. And but it was a great run. I do miss parts of it, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think he said it very well. Number one would be the players. Number two, the coaching staff. And when you're part of a coaching staff, you're around them, 10 to 12 hours a day, year round pretty much. And so just the camaraderie and relationships and all of that. That's probably, what I miss the most. And then, the last piece would probably be game day in Death Valley, for those big games and the excitement and all that. That's probably the three things that I would say I've missed the most.
I was talking with Dustin Fry, I don't know, maybe around a year ago about his experience at Clemson and going to SMU and then Arkansas, getting let go there. And he provided a window into the pockets of just where you're able to experience true joy and satisfaction during a season are so small. And as he related, that's why noon games are so treasured by coaches, is because you have longer to spend with your family and enjoy it. But he said even if you win, your position group could play not that well. And so you're spending the rest of the day with your family or whatever going, oh gosh, this is going to be a tough day tomorrow. Can y'all reflect on that? Just fans get to enjoy a win for a week, whereas coaches, I guess there's a 24-hour rule, but I'm not even sure it's that even close to that long.
Yeah, and I would definitely say that's the one tough thing about being a coach and also as a player. I mean, we grade everything every every detail is analyzed in what you do, and I think you've never coached a perfect game, or players never played a perfect game, so there's always things that you're going to come back in on Sunday and Monday and kind of critique and coach up. But yeah, I mean, I'd definitely say that the difference, in my time at Clemson, kind of leading up to the second national championship in 15-16, or I guess that was 16, leading up to that championship, the excitement of that run. And then after that, and now it's a different deal where you're on top of the hill, and, every week people are trying to knock you off. And if you have one loss, it feels like, you've kind of ruined the whole season. So there's a whole different maybe pressure or just maybe stress that kind of comes from trying to stay perfect, if you will. And that's a different feeling than when you're kind of working your way up the mountain. And, Coach Swinney said all the time, it's harder to stay on top than it is to get on top. And really it's just because now everybody's, gunning for you, and, there's just so much less room for error. So, yeah, that's definitely a real, framework of what it looks like and can feel like.
So I might just add there that I think Coach Swinney has done a wonderful job of celebrating the victory. The locker room, that was a little different, when Dabo got the job, or even when he was an interim, and he told the folks that worked with all the audio and the video, set that locker room up for some music because we're going to celebrate this victory. So it didn't matter if we played great and won by a large margin or met the expectation, or if we just barely got by and won it, on the last drive in the fourth quarter. We were going to celebrate that victory. And I think that just brought such energy. And, I mean, it's been a long week for the players especially, but also for the coaches. I think Coach Bowden, Bobby Bowden, when I was just a young coach, and, of course, that was kind of my mentor, and I hung on every word he said. And I remember one time we played in a big game, and we just didn't play well, but we snuck out a win, And he made a point to the staff. I said, don't ever apologize for a victory. They're hard to get, so enjoy it. We'll go to work on Monday. We'll correct mistakes, but that's how you get better. You learn from those mistakes. But as a coach, you want to be perfect. As Jeff said, you don't ever coach a perfect game. Your players don't play a perfect game. But they prepared hard, and they did what they had to win. A lot of times on the sideline during those games, there's a lot of adjustments that go on, and sometimes you get a great feeling knowing, hey, we had a problem, but we solved it. The guys responded. We found a way to win the game. But things are a little different now probably with social media, and every game's on TV now. And when I started, there was only maybe 1 or 2, 3 a week maybe that were on TV. So a little bit more of a microscope, and you got a lot of coaches out there in the stands. And the other thing I remember Coach saying one time, he said, hey, don't have rabbit ears. Don't listen to those fans in the stands. He said the coaches that listen to the fans in the stand end up sitting by them the next year.
This is Bobby?
Yeah, Bobby. Yeah, so he always had little sayings for things like that. He said, yeah, they're so smart. They coach our game for 3.5 hours, and then they go out in the parking lot and can't even find their car. So that's just kind of behind the scenes, little fun that we used to always have about it. But you have to keep things in perspective, and it's a great game. Dabo does such a wonderful job with his staff and with the players, and there's a lot of accountability. He holds those coaches accountable. He holds those players accountable. But you find a way to win a game, you celebrate it and enjoy it because they're hard to come by.
Spring of 2003. You were on the staff, and Rick Stockstill leaves to go to East Carolina. I guess he had the itch to run his own offense and left, which I believe is the most consequential departure in Clemson football history, because that paved the way for Tommy to call Dabo, who had been out of coaching for 2 years, as y'all know. My theory is because it was late. It was going into spring, I think, when Stockstill left. And so if he doesn't leave, if he decides to stick around another year, then that probably means Dabo's out of coaching for a third year. I'm not saying impossible, but a lot less likely, just from my feeling. But my question to you, Brad, is what's your recollection when you first encountered this new guy from Alabama that Tommy introduces to the staff?
Well, I was just so very impressed with him. The first time I met him, when I was the coach at South Carolina, Woody McCorvey was on my staff, and of course Dabo and Woody are extremely close, as we know, and Woody's one of Dabo's mentors. And so I remember him bringing this young, maybe he was a graduate assistant then, coach in to visit us for the day and practice and all. And there was always something about him. I thought to myself, we talk about the it factor a lot, and it's like, yeah, I think that guy's got it. He's going to probably have a bright future. Now you fast forward to what you're referring to there. I think Coach was maybe there was 3 guys that Coach Tommy Bowden was looking at, and they all kind of put on their best interview, you might say, and their preparation for it. But I remember when Coach Swinney came in, and he did have his kind of manual for wide receiver play and drills and fundamentals, and there was just such high energy about him and all. But the thing that impressed me the very most was the notebook, because Coach Bowden, of course, handling the interview, but he wanted some of us to meet with him privately, and I remember taking him to dinner at night too. But the thing that impressed me the most when he handed me a little book, a little notebook, and said, "What's this?" He said, "Well, those are all the players that I recruited when I was at Alabama. And not only is their numbers there, but here's their mom and dad and their names and their numbers." And, he had a complete manual of backgrounds of every one of those players and families. And I said, "Well, Coach, that's wonderful." He said, "No, I try to stay in touch with these boys. Of course, the ones that played with me, played for me, before the change was made. But nobody had ever shown me something like that I said, hey, this guy genuinely cares about his players and their families." And I don't know, the impressive interview, obviously, he's a good storyteller, and we laughed and cut up, and I think we were at Calhoun Corners that night for dinner, and it was a great time. But the things I remember was that really impressed me. And of course, he's turned out to be a masterful recruiter, and his connections with the kids and the family helps him be so competitive even in a very difficult situation now where college football's turned. So I remember telling Tommy, I said, "Well, you got to make this call, but I'm voting for this guy. I like this Dabo Swinney." And fortunately, that was the decision that Coach Bowden made, and I guess the rest is history.
Jeff, when was the first time you encountered him or heard of him, or sort of?
I came back because I played for Coach Stockstill my 4 years here as a wide receiver, and so I just missed Coach Swinney by literally just a couple months. But the fact that Dad was on staff, I was coaching high school football at Ridgeview High School for my first 2 years, and then Blythewood as the head coach the next 2 years. And so I would come back as much as I could, come back to Clemson. The fact that Coach Swinney was coaching wide receivers, which is what I played and really what I was interested in, I spent a lot of time kind of just learning from him and then working the football camps. So I really got a chance to work with Coach Swinney, coaching receivers at the football camp for 5 years before I came back as a GA on the staff. And so, that was kind of my introduction to him. And so whenever I showed back up here in, 2008 as a graduate assistant, after I finished at Blythewood High School, I went to Presbyterian College for 1 year in 2007. And then just really felt like I wanted to get back to Clemson. There was a graduate assistant position that opened up. And I told my dad I wanted to come to Clemson to be a GA. He said, absolutely not, because I was making about $50,000 as the receivers coach at Presbyterian. And, usually GA is kind of where you go. And after you do that for 2 years, then you go to a place like PC as a wideout coach. And I just said, well, I just really feel like I want to go be a graduate assistant. That's kind of the apprenticeship to work your way up. I don't want to skip that. So I came and, Coach Tommy Bowden was the head coach. Coach Swinney's the receivers coach. So now, and I'm actually working on defense. I was working with Coach Vic Conan as the defensive GA because that was a spot that opened. And then going into that summer camp, which would have been the 5th or 6th year that I got to work with Coach Swinney at football camp with the wide receivers, but it was my first year actually on staff as a GA. So he gave me a lot more responsibility, kind of doing some things at camp, helping him with not only the wideouts, but overall organizations of camp because he was running the camp. And what I'll remember is that July, so this would be July of 2008, after I worked that camp, he called me one night and just said, "Hey, Jeff, I just want to thank you. You did an awesome job helping me run the camps and all that, very well organized." He said, "I just want you to know that when I become a head coach one day, you're going to be one of the first guys I hire." And I said, "Man, that means a lot." And I hung up the phone and told my wife, Sarah, I said, "Hey, Coach Swinney called and said that, I did a good job and he's going to hire me one day when he gets a head coaching job." And I said, he's a really successful receivers coach, great recruiter. Probably 2 or 3 years from now, he'll be an OC, and then 2 or 3 years after that, I'll be a head coach. So, maybe 5 or 6 years from now, we'll get a chance to work with him. That's good, kind of, a hook in the water. And little did I know, it was only a couple months later, October 13th, 2008, and he gets named interim head coach. And I just happened to kind of be at the right place at the right time. But that history of those 5 years from whenever I left Clemson, coming back to coaches' clinics and spring ball, sitting in his meetings and working camp, I think that's what kind of led to him, feeling confident in me to give me that chance when he became interim and then permanent head coach.
Speaking of October 13th, 2008, the most extraordinary thing, one of the extraordinary things about the promotion of Dabo to interim was that he had not been a coordinator. Everybody knows that. But something maybe that people don't really think back to that made that decision truly extraordinary was there were 2 former head coaches on the staff, including you and Coach Koenig. I don't think I'm missing anybody else. But what was your immediate reaction? Was it one of surprise when Terry Don walks into the meeting room and shares the news and points at Dabo? Dabo couldn't be in my office in 10 minutes or whatever it was he said.
Yeah, so I don't know if it was as much a surprise as it was I was glad that obviously that he was, of course, keeping it within the staff, and also the fact that, Coach Swinney, he just had the players' interest, his energy, his popularity among the team. I think when you hear back on maybe how that decision was made, and you heard Terry Don back in those days say, and this was so true because Dabo's office was just a couple of doors down from where my office was, and between practices or even in the off season or about any time you could go by a coach's office if he was there and we weren't in meetings. It was just always like full of players. Players just gravitated to him. And I think, the athletic director's in the same building those days, and I think Terry Don walking by that and seeing that so many times just recognized that, hey, we got to finish this season. Hopefully we'll finish it strong and get some W's. But I think that a popular choice among our players who they'll follow the best on this staff has got to be Dabo. And then, Terry Don's pretty sharp. He hired some pretty good coaches back in his career. And, not just at Clemson, but Oklahoma State, all the other places I think that he was at. But I think that was the real factor that he could pull the team together, which he did the very first meeting. And then when he came into the staff meeting, or when he was introduced by Terry Don as this is going to be our interim coach, I think everybody respected that and liked it because he included everybody. I mean, I think from that time, I remember him coming right down to my office and just saying, "Hey, man, this is something new. I'm excited, but I'm going to need your help, or I'm going to need that." I think he visited every one of the staff members, and he immediately made a change in one of the positions, that very day, I think. And so you could tell that he wasn't thinking he had all the answers yet, but he also wasn't, he didn't lack confidence. He immediately made some changes and adjusted and tweaked some things that he thought could be better. And if you've talked, I'm sure, in an interview with many of the players that were on that team, the very first meeting, he introduced them to his way of thinking and some all in and some, hey, you don't have to stay. We'll learn your scholarship, but if you step on that practice field today, this is what I'm going to expect. And he began to lay out his vision. It wasn't by surprise to me that he was successful, because I think even though he hadn't had those other positions, he was preparing himself for an opportunity, whether it was going to be the offensive coordinator or the head coach in one day. And he had been in on some jobs just that year. There was a job that he thought he was going to get, and he didn't get it. And I remember how disappointed that he was. And I remember talking to him and just saying, hey, hang in there. You got a bright future. God's got a bigger plan for you. You know, that was a month or so before this ever happened. Or maybe it was the summer. I think it was the summer prior to this season. But, you know, that deal about preparation, you know, is you don't try to prepare at the moment. You prepare way ahead of time. And some people call it luck. But, you know, people say, no, it's when preparation, when opportunity meets preparation. And that's, Dabo wasn't lucky. He was prepared. And that opportunity presented itself, and he took it and ran with it. There wasn't any jealousies. There wasn't anybody that was saying, oh, man, that's not a good decision. That's not. No, everybody kind of bought in, and hey, let's get together. We didn't, you know, your future's on the line too. You don't know what's going to happen. So he rallied the troops, and we got behind him, and we had a lot of fun that year. Those were some great finishes and some close games.
For both of you, you know, there's a difference between, hey, we can do this. You know, we can be a good staff. There's a difference between that and this thing could be national championship type stuff. Whichever of you want to answer this first, do you remember when you started thinking, oh, this thing could be it's headed to be in a true powerhouse?
And I would say from the very first conversation, I mean, I remember when on that October 13, 2008, I remember when he called me, it was around lunchtime, and he said, where are you? I said, I'm down here at Firehouse Subs getting subs for the defensive coaches. He said, come on back to my office. So I went back there, and he told me what had happened and told me he was going to move me from graduate assistant to coach the receivers for the rest of the year. And he said, even though, you know, people on the outside don't think we're going to get this job, we're going to get this job. And I remember right there, that was just hearing his optimism and belief in it for the very first time, you know, talking to a GA. He's just happy to be moving into a full-time role for the last 6 games. That stuck out to me, that he really did believe from the very beginning, when on the outside, I mean, you don't, you know, have a coach that's been in place for whatever 7 or 8 years and then want to have a change. You don't just go hire a position coach and call it a day. I mean, that's very not normal, if you will. But so I noticed that right away. But you know, I would say, I mean, there's obviously being around him every day and learning and seeing. You know, there's a couple moments, obviously, from a football perspective. You know, I think the win against LSU in the Chick-fil-A Bowl, that was really one that I kind of consider as that first big win on a national scale, where you're like, okay, we're coming, right? That whole deal. So that would be the feeling there. And then I would go back, you know, to another story that's not maybe just directly about Coach Swinney, but I remember when Chad Morris came to Clemson, and we had a lot of success in his first year, and Chad and I became very close. We worked, you know, together and around each other every day. And when Chad got an opportunity about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way into that first season, he gets contacted during the season by a coach that was out of coaching, very popular coach that was going to be taking a big-time job soon. And he was offered a really big raise. And again, I think we're only like 8 or 9 games into that Coach Morris's first season. He told me about it, and I said, well, good luck, because I can just tell you right now, you know, the Clemson I know is not going to be able to match that just from a salary standpoint. And it wasn't 2 days later, Chad signed a huge 5-year deal, over $5 million. And, you know, again, that was, you know, Coach Swinney and Terry Don. But that was for me being around Clemson for so long, that was a big moment, like, oh, okay, we are serious about this thing. We are willing to invest what it takes to keep the best, you know, coaches. And then that just led into the whole facilities and all those. So those were like 2 moments maybe from a big picture perspective where I went, okay, this thing's about to get serious. But also, I mean, I remember before, I guess it would be before the 2015 season, when we lost to Bama in the championship game, I mean, I remember Coach Swinney saying, "Hey, I have a feeling I believe we're going to play Alabama for the national championship." You know, he walked in the offensive staff room one day during fall camp and said that. You know, he walks out. We're like, "Okay, well, we know what you're thinking about." We're sitting here trying to figure out, how to get a first down on, short yardage situation. But I mean, he just had a vision and belief and instilling that in not just the players but also the coaches. And it was awesome to. I would say I did not consider myself a pessimist or a major optimist. I'll probably consider myself more of a realist, if you will. But I've learned through my 12 years with Coach Swinney the power of having that positive mindset and the power of belief. And I saw how that literally was one of the main foundation pieces to him changing the overall thought process and belief within the Clemson football program.
Yeah, just to tag on to a couple things there. It didn't take long for coaches' enthusiasm and energy not only to be infectious among our players, but also in recruiting. I mean, the stories that you hear about him. Well, first as assistant, the C.J. Spiller. I mean, you saw that. You saw things that you said, "Hey, this guy's got a nice little demeanor about him." Let's say people like him, they trust him, they believe him. But he sold that vision. If you ask the coach this question, Coach Swinney, he'd probably say, "Oh, from day one, that was my vision." And you've heard him tell the story about the first year when he went before the board of trustees, and they said, "Hey, we just want a program, that'll be respectable. We'd just like to be able to." And then they mentioned a few teams that we know we're not where Georgia is, and this, that, and the other. And yes, first year or something, he said, "No, I want to be the team that y'all talk about. We're going to beat the Georgias. We're going to beat the Florida States. We're going to beat." And so he had that confidence. But I think the years where all of a sudden the 5-star kids started coming to Clemson, and it's kids recruiting kids back in those days. The staff was very important, and of course the head coach was the most important. But I just know when players came to Clemson, they kind of caught the enthusiasm, the energy, the belief, and then they started coming, and you just started seeing the Sammy Watkins and the Deshaun Watsons, and I don't know, just you name them, they were starting to come. So the assembly of some great players, and then with coaches constant in front of the team talking about success. He's a master motivator, and those pre-practice meetings that he had, some are very short, some are a little longer, but he always had a message for the team about belief, and it was always positive. Whether we're climbing that mountain, we stuck his flag in the ground, you know all those stories. But if it needed to be, he wasn't scared to put that film on from Saturday and say, "What is that? That's not our effort." He held kids accountable from the stars right on down to the old boy that was just happy to get in the game. But he changed that mindset. But it goes from the coach to the players, and then the players in the locker room. Then they begin to have a standard and an expectation, and the guys that came in began to follow them, and that's when you have the great seasons and the great teams, and somewhere along the way, those just kind of came together, and I think the same thing's going to happen in the future.
Can we dig into Sammy Watkins' recruitment? You knew him as a ninth grader?
Yes, I was told about him when he was in the ninth grade. So he was from Fort Myers, Florida. And I'd always recruited because my hometown was Arcadia, and that was about 40 miles north of Fort Myers. So from the early 80s when I started at FSU, that was kind of part of my recruiting area. The state of Florida is what we hit the most. And so I had the panhandle all the way to Jacksonville down to Daytona. But that little area for Fort Myers, Bradenton, Sarasota, and what they call the Heartland, a lot of tough rural country boys, So I took pride then in just establishing those relationships with not just future players maybe and families, but with the coaches as well. And so Sammy's a retired Florida coach that had been very successful as a head coach and all. His name was Joe Hampton. biggest FSU, alum and fan you've ever met. So he's coaching. He's just helping out a program down there, and South Fort Myers. And he said, "Hey, there's a little ninth grader." He was JV coach. He said, "Hey, there's a little ninth grader here that's pretty talented. You need to know who he was." So I remember writing that name down, and so I said, "Okay, Sammy Watkins." You couldn't contact the underclassmen at that time, but so I go to the jamborees back when they had jamborees, and even as a young player, I said, he got a little something special. So along the way, using coaches' contacts and visiting with them, and then the coach, the high school coach, would tell families and all. So Sammy's stepdad called me maybe prior to Sammy's junior season. And so you can take those calls if they called you. And so he began to say, "Oh, yeah, man, I'm the biggest FSU fan. I followed the team. I know your career there, and I know, whatever, when you were coordinating offense and won the championships and, Charlie Ward and all this other." And I said, "Hey, sounds like you like me." "Yeah, well, yeah, well." I said, "Well, guess what? I'm the same guy. I'm just coaching at a different school. So I want you to kind of learn all you can about Clemson." And back in those days, the guidelines for getting in school were probably a little more challenging than they are now. And so those core classes, you had to have so many math, so many English, all that, and then you had to have a minimum test score. So just beginning to work with Sammy's guidance counselors and folks and trying to help them, making sure that he was in the proper classes and doing the things that needed to be done. And maybe somewhere along the way it was attend summer school to replace a grade, just all the creative things that you do to help a youngster. And that kind of helped be part of the difference there, because when everybody kind of figured out that, hey, this guy might be the best player in the state that year, and all the in-state schools and people trying to move in. But I think it was that foundation that we had with him that started way back maybe in the ninth grade of just sending that questionnaire. That's about all you could do at that time. But then being involved with their life over those next couple years. And then Chad came in that year. Jeff was the receiver coach. He's visiting with them. And then, that was just kind of a special time. Coach Swinney, was awesome with them. And, we didn't expect, there's so many Sammy stories. And Jeff, he was recruiting some great receivers too. And I said, well, there's something pretty good about this kid. But he's in Florida and you didn't have his video. I think it was just reel-to-reel stuff. I said, no, this kid's pretty good. So he came to camp. I'm down there coaching OL, we're going through those 2 hours and a half of camp drills while they're up there playing pass scale, catching, doing all that. They having fun, That's the other thing with offensive line coach, football camps. I don't miss them one bit. But I think there was a water break, and Jeff came running down there and said, hey, Dad, I think you're right. This kid is something else. And, things happen, and before you know it, he's starting as a freshman. And I think the fun thing, too, we love to tell the story, his very first touch at Clemson was shaking a touchdown, and it was just the beginning.
And we had several big-time wideouts that we were recruiting that year, and Sammy, being down in Fort Myers, he couldn't get up to Clemson, so he hadn't visited where a lot of these other guys had. We got to know them, but Dad would always come in like, hey, I'm telling you, this Sammy Watkins, he's going to be the real deal. And we'd put his video on, but his high school tape looked like it was videoed, recorded out of a blimp. The players are like super small on there. You couldn't really see. You could see him move around, but you couldn't really tell, how special he was. And so I think his first visit was to camp going into his senior year. So he came up, and I could, you could tell in the first, of course I was like, oh my gosh, this guy looks like a running back. He's 6'2" and filled out, and we did a couple drills, and I could tell, and I put all these receivers that would come through Clemson over, my 12 years there, I put them all through the same drills, so you can kind of notice the ones that separate, and just how fast he was. I told him, I think one thing I told him was after about the first 15 minutes working with him, like, man, you're like a 15, 16-year-old kid whose dad gave him the keys to a Maserati. You're flying, but you got to learn how to kind of control your body a little bit, but the combination of speed, acceleration, and hands, he just caught everything. The other funny story that I don't think has been told before was, so during that camp, after that camp was over, we brought him up to meet with Coach Swinney in Coach Swinney's office. And so we're sitting there, and Coach Swinney's kind of going through his talk, and Sammy, as a recruiting coach, I'm like there to make sure Sammy's listening and everything's going well. Sammy's kind of listening, but he's just kind of looking through a pro press guide that's on Coach Swinney's little, coffee table desk. And Coach Swinney's trying to make sure you're listening to me, kind of going through it. And after Coach Swinney gets done, about 20 minutes, he looks at Sammy, says, "Sammy, you have any questions about any of that?" He looks up and says, "No, sir, but I'm coming." And Coach Swinney said, "What?" Sammy said, "I'm coming." I said, "You're coming? What does that mean?" He said, "Yeah, I'm going to commit. I'm coming." He's like, "Really?" He looks to me like, "Are you sure? Like, is this good?" I'm like, "Yes." And, a lot of that was the foundation of what my dad was just talking about. And, going back to, the best coaches are the ones, and that's why Coach Swinney's such a great recruiter, because when he was on the road as an assistant, he was able to develop relationships. But what my dad just described, that relationship that he had with Joe Hampton, during all the years my dad was coaching at Florida State, and Coach Hampton would come up and my dad would clinic and talk to him, that relationship. Well, now here it is, whatever it was, 15, 20 years later after all that, Coach Hampton picks up the phone, has, what coach is he going to call? And he calls my dad, who happens to be at Clemson. And if you heard Sammy and his mom and stepdad, they'd say, "Hey, Coach Hampton said Coach Brad Scott's the guy that we need to play for, so that's what we're going to do." That was literally how recruiting was, back at the beginning. But I think that relationship and trust all the way through kind of helped. But it was really funny that but here's what I also would say about Sammy. Some of our best players at Clemson were the most low maintenance. And from the time, and Coach Swinney and myself spent the next hour trying to be sure that Sammy understood that if he committed, he couldn't take any visits, he couldn't go anywhere else. And now he had really just risen where he's going to be, one of the top players in the state of Florida. So we knew what was coming. And Sam was like, "No, I know this is where I want to go. I'm good. I'm not going to take any visits." And he didn't. He went back, had a great senior year, didn't take any visits, and we had no issues whatsoever. He came, but a lot of times the guys that are the low maintenance guys in recruiting end up coming to be the low maintenance guys whenever they're with you, and then the other can be true as well. But yeah, that was pretty interesting. He committed pretty quickly right there, and then he was loyal all the way through. But that's what was fun for me, being able to go back to Florida and recruit during my 12 years at Clemson. A lot of the same areas where my dad had recruited for all those years prior, and just like that one story of Coach Joe Hampton, all these coaches had stories about my dad and how he always took time for them, made time for them, and was always around as a recruiter back in the Florida State days.
You were responsible for signing not just Sammy, but Martavis, Mike Bellamy as well. This is after a 6 and 7 season.
Shaq. People forget about old Shaq. Also, he was pretty good. He was in that class too.
After a 6 and 7 season, after a Meineke Car Care Bowl loss to South Florida, people are like, "Wait a minute, something has to be going on here that's not up to snuff." I had a source close to you tell me that the NCAA came asking questions.
Yeah, you were the only one questioning that, right? So I think it just comes down to, again, to give Coach Swinney the credit. He was. We had just come off not a great season, and everybody was a little bit down. And he stood in the locker room, Jeff remembers, after that CarQuest Bowl and said, "I firmly believe the next 10 years of Clemson football will be the best in the history of this program." But those guys we recruited there, they all kind of had their own story. Martavis was an unbelievable athlete, one of the fastest kids ever. And he was tall like a gazelle. He could catch and run, and he was from a little small school and very similar. Lived with his mom, but they both lived with the grandmother. So the grandmother was the kind of the one there that you knew you get close to her. Then and it wasn't just for that, but that's just how you recruit. She was a factor in it, and so very similar as far as grades and getting in the right classes. Not that they couldn't do the work; they just maybe. We're still new to guidance counselors too. Every year they were tweaking it. Now we're up to 16 core classes, test scores, and getting the kids prepped for tests, making sure they were getting tutored by people at the school, working with the math teacher, getting them to the test, making sure, when I say getting them to, just calling, "Hey, test is more." You got, because there have been some no-shows sometimes. So that, and then Mike Bellamy, He was another 5-star. All he did was break all the Emmett Smith's high school records. And the fans that remember Mike when he was here that season, he was unbelievable, so fast and fluid, natural. And so the story behind that one, again, I was from Arcadia. So Mike was going to school in Punta Gorda, which is 20 miles from Arcadia, had a really good program. And he lived and was being raised by his grandmother. Well, it just happened that his grandmother was in my high school class. We graduated together, Miss Ernestine. And so, I'm putting these pieces together and I'm saying, hey, this is going to shape up pretty good too, possibly. Let me get in there. And so we knew each other, of course, going to school together. So there was a trust factor there. And the high school coach there was named Beaky Waldrop, and he had been there in Punta Gorda for a long time, and I recruited a lot of his players. And so there was a little, and Beaky knew that Mike was going to maybe need a little bit of, guidance and direction, and he was confident in me and comfortable. So the stars just kind of lined up, and we pulled it off. But then, it was like not long thereafter. I'll tell you one funny story. But I did get a chance to meet with the old boys from the NCAA and thought, well, I got nothing to hide. But you begin to like what they get you phone records, they get everything. And there's certain people you couldn't call. But I had this little day timer that I kept, and I'm kind of my wife. She said, quit giving me lists. I'm not one of your players, but just meaning that the days when I recruited, I wrote down which school and what player, and so I had a backlog from spring of that year all the way through. And I think that was really something that the NCAA said, hey, this is all, because you're getting turned in from doing all kinds of things, from, too many visits, too many phone calls, buying them meals, doing this. But I knew that I had not done that. And so meeting with them, though, when you walk in that room, there's your compliance director, there's your faculty rep there. The athletic director's office is there. The NCAA boy with his coat and tie on and his microphone and an attorney. And I'm like, hey, I didn't need all this. All I remember doing is going back to the coaches and saying, hey, be detailed in your recruiting and in your reports. And, we had all that. And it was just a one-time meeting and all that went good. But I had to tell this part of the story. So that, since you brought it up, so we get Sammy, he's 5-star. We get Mike Bellamy, he's 5-star. And they're both from Florida, and probably 1, 2, or 3 top players in the state. So Urban Meyer's the coach at Florida then, right? So Urban kind of comes out and makes a statement. I just don't understand how this Clemson can come into our state. Oh, and to add a little caveat there, Sammy's half-brother was a starting safety for the Gators.
Jalen.
Yeah. And so Urban's not real happy about this, and he said, I don't understand how this Clemson program can come in here and recruit the top 2. He was kind of insinuating that maybe we weren't doing things above board. So I just laughed about it and said, well, I've heard that before when we were at Florida State. I think the old coach at Florida back in those days was somebody everybody in this state knows now, and he'd make the same statements about Florida State, how they keep signing these top classes. Oh my God. But the funny thing with the Urban story was that later he kind of retired. And remember that year he was working with ESPN doing
11
color.
11.
The next year.
Yeah, next year.
So he's doing color for the ESPN and all that. So he had about 2 of our games right in a row or something. But I think it's maybe even the first one. He's up there, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but seeing the atmosphere in Tiger, the Tiger fan base was just going wild. It was Clemson at its finest. And he said, I used to wonder how in the world could Clemson recruit these top players, out of Florida, but now I see why. This is in one unbelievable place. And I think it's one of the quotes that's up in our football facility. Was an Urban Meyer quote. No, nothing. I forget exactly how he said it, but that's what he said. Now I see. So that was kind of fun for me to hear that.
The other 2 funny things talking about the NCAA coming and having interviewed Dad. So Mike Bellamy's aunt was in a car accident, and so she got a little settlement of maybe $2,500. And so this is about his senior year after he's committed to us and all that. So she brings the $2,500 by the high school when she's picking up Mike and shows it to Mike. And Mike says, "Oh, I want to take a picture with it." Because that was, would be pretty cool to have that. So he takes that picture of him holding that money, and boy, everybody, all the Florida fans and everybody, boy, that got to them today real quick. And then Kenneth Page was another O-lineman about the same time. And these are like within a month of each other that Dad had signed out of AC Flora in Columbia. Kenneth is in California visiting his uncle, who his job was to fill up ATM machines. And so he's in the car and he's got, all these $100 bills, and so like both pictures show up in about a month, and that's when the NCAA came in. But I looked at it honestly as like a huge compliment to Clemson to be able to recruit guys, do things the right way when everybody on the outside is saying there's no way that you guys are, doing it the right way. And I know people are spelling Clemson with the money sign and all that with the S. And but yeah, those were kind of just odd things that happened that kind of didn't look good on the outside. But we knew we could definitely sleep easy at night when you did things the right way.
Upstate foodies, want to take a moment to talk to you about our favorite taco spot, Willie Taco. 5 locations across the upstate. This award-winning team has been serving up fresh taco fusion for a solid decade now. The chefs at Willie Taco utilize the freshest, most creative, and sometimes unexpected ingredients in their kitchens. Come see why Southern Living, Garden and Gun, and Food and Wine Magazine are raving about Willie Taco and their signature offerings, such as their Southern Tide, Crispy Avocado, Nashville Hot Chicken Tacos, literally flavors you will not find anywhere else, folks. And don't forget about the cocktails. Super fresh margaritas, ice cold cerveza, and over 80 tequilas served up daily from behind the bar. So don't wait, folks. Your Willie Taco Familia is ready to serve you up their twist on funky, fresh fusion. It's the Willie way. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Its office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archambault. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507.
Can we go back to the FSU days? And you were around during one of the most pivotal, junctures in college football history, it turned out, when Coach Bowden had an opportunity to go to Alabama, maybe around, after Ray Perkins, after at 86 thereabouts. What was your window into that? What do you remember?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll probably end it by telling you kind of similar to the Clemson story when you're saying, how did you know? That it was going to be special. So we're playing in the American Bowl in Birmingham, Alabama. So I believe it was 1986. We're playing Indiana. By the way, the running back for Indiana was a guy named Andre Powell. Oh. So that kind of dates me a little bit. But Andre was a big old fullback. He was tough, man, a good player. And so we're up there in Birmingham, and there's a vacancy now in Tuscaloosa. And everybody always said, well, Bobby Bowden will leave, Florida State to go to Alabama. That's the one job that, he's always, he and Bear Bryant were all buddies, and, he's from that area and the whole deal. So he calls me in about the middle of the week of that bowl prep and said, look, he said, Alabama is going to offer me that job, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to want you on the way home to go through Tuscaloosa. Now, you got to understand, I'd been there for 2.5, maybe it was my 3rd year there. So I'm 28, 29 years old, and I'm like, he said, I'm gonna take you with me, and I'm going to keep you in charge of recruiting. I was recruiting coordinator. You always start off tight end coach, recruiting coordinator. That's just part of it. So he said, I want you to go back through there and get a feel for the staff, and tell me who you think are the best recruiters and who your impression of them. And he said, now, I don't want you to tell anybody about this. And so I was just like stunned. But, I'm thinking, Alabama, here's the old boy from little old Arcadia, look at me. And I'm going fishing, go to Alabama. So I said, Coach, can I tell my wife? He said, well, you can tell Daryl, but y'all can't tell a soul. So I remember going, I said, yes, sir. Going back and telling Daryl, and of course, my brother-in-law, they're from Dothan, Alabama, and they're biggest Alabama fans you ever seen. And I didn't call them yet and tell them, but I told Daryl, and she was like, I can't believe it either. And I don't know who else he might have been having those conversations with. So now, Coach Hootie Ingram was the AD. He had been, the AD at FSU prior to going back to Alabama. He just passed away about a year ago. He was a great man. Had helped me so much in my career. But Hootie was AD, and then Bobby's
AD at Alabama.
At Alabama,
Okay.
He had left Florida State to go to Alabama, so he knew what Bobby Bowden was all about. And Bobby had told him, well, I'll take the job, but I'm not interviewing for the job. I've got a good job, but I'm not going to go interview for the job. You either offer me it, you want me, or you don't. So my understanding was that Coach Bowden, they said yes. Well, they talked him in, Hootie talked him in to going down to Tuscaloosa maybe after one of our practices and just let's talk and begin to do it. And then when he got there, they said, well, I need you, Bobby, just to go in and maybe say hello to couple people here and all. And while we're here, well, you walked him in there, and there's a committee kind of, and some administrators, and some people just started popping questions at Coach and all. And I don't know everything that went on other than he walked out of that room, and in his mind, he didn't. And there were rumors everywhere. All the television stations back in Tallahassee. Hey, Bobby, he's going to take that job. We just feel like he will. And I didn't know that at that time what all had happened, but I'm still thinking I might be going through Tuscaloosa, right? So it gets cold, and it's less like I want to make this story good. I'm going to say there's an ice storm, and we're trying to, this weather's so bad that Coach said, hey, we just going to try to get back to Tallahassee, and, so they kind of canceled that. So I'm still excited, Daryl and I are sitting in Tallahassee. We're on the couch there, got the heater going. We're trying to stay warm, and breaking press conference, breaking news. And here's Coach Bowden standing out in front of his house and said, I don't know where all these rumors are coming from. He said, I got the best job in college football. I'm not going anywhere. Hey, Florida State will win a national championship. Our program's further on. We'll win a national championship before they do in Alabama. And Daryl and I looked at each other and I think I told Jeff, probably the kids, that, hey, we're fixing to go. And we just looked there. We were totally stunned. And then, of course, we had a staff meeting later, and Coach kind of did that. And then he kind of said, and that's what he told him. He said, kind of the story came out later that it really made him mad. They were asking him questions and all, and that he had said that. But seriously, the ice storms sent us to Tallahassee. We're on the couch thinking he's going to go to Bama, and he's right in front of the house with Miss Ann standing beside him and said, we ain't going nowhere. I got a better job than Alabama. We're going to win a national championship here before they do.
Amazing. Amazing.
And they did, and we did.
Yeah, in 93.
93.
Yeah. Leaving Florida State to take the South Carolina job, I guess 8 years later, I heard you might have been having some second thoughts on that. A little birdie told me.
Well,
do you remember?
So he doesn't like telling this story, but I do because I think it's hilarious. Because also I think whenever you see coaches, at that time of the year, December, January, when coach is going to stay, is he going to leave, to be able to get some color of kind of the behind the scenes. So how I remember the story, I was in the 7th grade, and again, this was December of 92. And we had...
93.
93, because we won that championship in 93.
Okay. December of 93. So Florida State was going to play in the national championship game later that month. South Carolina contacts Dad. I think we went up there, visited, and the thought... What I remember is my mom and Dad telling me at the beginning of December that, listen, we're probably going to take the head coaching job at University of South Carolina. We're going to be moving to Columbia right after the game in January, and I'm all excited about that. Dad's going to be a head coach, and they're in the SEC. But so then I go back to school again. I'm in the 7th grade. It's like the first week of December, and the teacher in my science class, presents this science fair project that we're going to work on for like the next month and a half, and it's dealing with like petri dishes and all this stuff. Well, I'm like looking at it again, the mindset of a seventh grader, or 13 years old. I'm like, in my mind, well, I don't have to do that because I'm not going to be here in January. I'm going to be in Columbia, South Carolina. So for the next 3 weeks, while everybody else was working on that in class, I wasn't working on. I was just walking around talking to my friends, and I'm kind of like, hey, in my mind, this is pretty cool. I don't have to do this project because I'm not going to be here. And so I don't remember how long it was later, but it was at least 10 days later or so. I come home and my mom tells me, well, I just talked to your dad, and he's been talking to Coach Bowden, and I think we may be staying. We're not going. And the first thing that went to my mind was not anything about the job or career. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail this science project. So immediately I just starts going, Mom, and there's like a scene in Remember the Titans where his daughter's like up there and like trying to talk to his dad and coaching his dad up. I start doing that to my mom. I'm like, Mom, this is an SEC head coaching job. We don't know if we're going to get another one of these. What, so my mom calls my dad after me going crazy. He's like, I think you need to come home because I just told the boys and Jeff's really upset about it. So he comes home, and looking back on it, I think he probably was kind of like in between. Am I going to leave? Again, he'd been at Florida State for 10 or 11 years, and we're getting ready to play national championship. But I do feel that my urging, and again, I didn't tell them at all about the science fair project and what I was worried about. I just was telling them I think he should take the job. So I remember like the next day, we flew back up there, go back and see everything again, and he takes the job. After the championship game, we take the job. The reason I think that's a funny story is, without going to South Carolina and spending the 5 years there, which led to Clemson, where, it really changed our life. We had the most incredible, 20 years being affiliated with Clemson and all the doors that opened. But I just look back at that and say, without that science fair project, would any of this ever happen? So I don't know if Dad wants to confirm or deny any of that, but that was just hilarious to me at a young age.
Well, what can I say? I didn't know anything about the science fair. So, it was Coach Art Baker gave me my first start in 1983, I think it was. That was when I was high school, maybe 81. I was a GA for Coach Baker at the Citadel. A lot of your audience probably going to know and love Art Baker. He's one of the most beloved coaches in the state of South Carolina, Hall of Fame guy, Furman head coach, Citadel head coach, East Carolina head coach, all that.
Eau Claire back in the day.
Eau Claire, yeah. And so he was at South Carolina. He had worked here for Frank Howard at Clemson back in the days too. So he's at South Carolina as on the administrative staff in the Gamecock Club, I think. So that was kind of my guy that was throwing my name out there a little bit. And so when I got the call, I was like, oh, okay, well, hey, maybe I should talk to him. Coach Baker's calling me. The president called to just say, hey, we'd like to stop by, talk to you sometime. So I did, and I started getting pretty, you get wrapped up in that. I was, 38, 39 years old, and I was beginning to think, hey, well, maybe this is my opportunity. So Coach Bowden, you always contact your head coach, say, look, they're talking to me. He's, like, hey, buddy, that's awfully good. That's awfully good. Take your time, look through everything. And, don't forget we're playing for a national championship. I was the offensive coordinator, so, and Coach Bowden was so supportive. But, so you go through it, and you're going through the recruiting. We had not been up to Columbia yet. And so you just get the calls on the phone, and then Coach Baker's, and, they were doing their 4 or 5 interviews, flying them planes in where the fans couldn't follow where they were going. We had to meet in certain different places, all this stuff. So I had these secretive meetings. Then you begin to lay in bed at night thinking, oh, my goodness, this is a pretty big step, And Daryl's liking Tallahassee, but, the thought. But I do need to throw this little addition in there because boy, football was a little different in '93. So I'm the offensive coordinator, and I love this little evaluation at the end of the year. Coach Bowden would do the evaluation just like Coach Swinney has to do on his staff. They turn them in, and it has your salary down there. So I like to always show that to Jeff. I keep that thing there. So I'm the offensive coordinator. It's 93. We win the title. My salary was $65,000. $65,000. And you can't. I mean, they pay analysts double that probably now. So I was like, man. So I think my total package maybe that first year at South Carolina was going to be maybe 320 or something. And it was like, man, what would we do with all that money? We're okay. We got us a 2,000 square foot house right here in the back of one of these little neighborhoods, and got us out of that little Volkswagen. I got a courtesy car now. Got an old used bass boat. We go fishing. Life's pretty good. And then it was like, they kept saying. Then they sweetened the pot a little bit more. And I don't want to say it was money driven, but it was just like, I don't know how important that really was because I was so comfortable. You never saw anybody leave Florida State staff or Coach Bowden's staff. And even after I left, the few that left, Mark Rick finally, took the Georgia job. He was offered 2 or 3 head jobs and never took them. Then Chuck Amato got the NC State job. And so that was about the only people ever leaving. And so I was like, man, is this good? And so I think between that and then I went to see Coach Bowden one morning. He said, come on over to the house, let's have breakfast. And we talked about it, the pros and the cons. He said, it's a big time. We had played up there when Coach Morrison was there, and he had that one great year.
84.
And they beat us, and which usually that wasn't happening. But that's when they had that little saying about if it ain't swaying, we ain't playing. And, I mean, it was loud, it was electric, and I just remember that. And I was like, hey, I got these memories of that place, and that was a pretty intimidating place. So anyway, Coach Bowden said, well, you need to think long and hard about it. There's been some awfully good coaches, and he brought up Coach that was at LSU that went to South Carolina.
Dietzel.
Coach Dietzel, who won a national championship at LSU, and, didn't have great success there, and a couple of others, and then he said, that schedule, and so I've got that. I've also got Coach Bowden's agent because I didn't know even. I think Coach McGee was AD down there. Then he said, "Well, you need to get an agent or somebody to represent you," which is kind of odd that the AD. They're probably like, okay. So he was calling saying, "Hey, I think we, maybe this, maybe that," and so Coach Bowden was just saying, "Just give it some thought. You need to be 100% in, and all that." And that started. Well, then you got Terry Bowden, his son, who I was close with, and Tommy, and Terry's the head coach at Auburn. They're having some success, and he's going to say, "Hey, because the agent was Terry's." He called Terry. Terry called and said, "Are you crazy? There's only 103 of these head jobs. There was 103 pros in, and there's only X amount of these in these conferences. Hey, this is your opportunity.
Wow.
You better." So between Terry calling me, and I think I talked to because Tommy that year, Tommy, I forget whether he was at Auburn or Alabama, he was OC at a lot of places. So everybody, and then coaches just saying, be sure about it. So then I came home talking to Daryl, and then she's telling the boys, don't get your hopes up, he might not be taking it, and this and that. Well, the final decision was they said, we're sending the plane down to Tallahassee to get you and the boys, and, this is just how common a fella maybe I was, or the family, I was like, Daryl, I probably need to get a sport coat, new sport coat. We traveled in sweats. I don't even know if I had the right kind of coat, She said, okay. She went and bought the boys some sweaters, and we had to get the right tie. And, I said, okay. So they sent the plane down. That was pretty nice. It was the president's plane. They flew us in the back hangar, did all the recruiting stuff that they do, and breakfast with the president the next morning, and this, that, and the other. And so that was kind of, anybody's going to be impressed with a Clemson or even a South Carolina or a major program and what's now a Power 5 program. So then I committed that I'd take the job, and Jeff and John were back here. Yeah. So that's kind of our little story about it, but that was the second thoughts. But I was hearing from both sides, and some good things. Obviously we had some good times there, and a lot of friends, but Clemson was our special place. And I just want to add this. Mickey Andrews is on our staff at Florida State. So coaches sit around always talking, and we all say, man, we love Tallahassee, we love FSU, and everybody's kind of talking about, yeah. And Mickey made a comment once, said, yeah, I do love it here, he said, but let me tell you, nothing was more special to me than those years that I coached at Clemson.
Wow.
He said, that's a special place. So when I ended up at Clemson, I called Coach Andrews. I said, Coach, I think you're right.
Wow.
And I think you're right. So you know, you had the state was pretty good. We played in Death Valley that first year, had a little success with it, but I saw that atmosphere, and it was so different than, when I say the atmosphere, Columbia, the capital, the politics a little bit, the newspapers, that's before all the social media stuff. You had so many more people following that program. I remember coming to Clemson, you guys weren't around back in those days. There was about 3 reporters or something. Well, no, you were maybe with the
Post and Courier,
I think.
yeah.
But you know how it was. It wasn't but about 3 or 4 y'all that covered it. So I know I'm on a little tangent there. But, yeah, that's kind of the South Carolina story and how that came about.
Yeah, and then the better story is leaving South Carolina, going to Clemson. So I'm a senior in high school, and I had a half scholarship to go to Furman to play quarterback. So that's really where I thought that I was getting ready to go. And then, Dad calls me, and I've told the story a couple of times, but it's a good one because it's a good reminder to all of us that sometimes when you have a dead end, there's another door that gets open that's better than anything you can imagine. But I remember the season didn't go well, had a bunch of injuries, and only won 1 game. So we knew it was his 5th season. Didn't really know how what was going to happen at the end of the year. So Dad called me and my brother back to his sunroom there in his bedroom, and told us that, hey, tomorrow they're going to be letting him go. He's going to resign. And I remember being, again, I'm 17, 18 years old, senior in high school, and I'm just kind of really disappointed. And I mean, Dad's whole career at Florida State did nothing but win, and leading to this opportunity, gets to South Carolina the first season. They win the first bowl game in the history of the school, and the president's in the locker room after the game saying, hey, as long as I'm the president of the University of South Carolina, Brad Scott will be our head football coach. And now 4 years later, I'm learning about the profession and how all that works. And so, but what Dad told both me and my brother at that time, he said, God's got a better plan for us. And he quoted Jeremiah 29:11. It says, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. And basically plans for prosper and to give you a new future and hope. And I remember at the time, I didn't really want to hear that at 18 years old. I was just kind of like, yeah, maybe that's just what you say when things don't go your way. And so all of a sudden, but Dad was just telling us, hey, the good Lord has a plan for us, and we're just going to follow that, and we got to trust that. And 3 days later, after getting let go at South Carolina, Tommy Bowden gets hired at Clemson, calls my dad, obviously because of that relationship. And again, the difference in the salaries back then, now when head coaches get let go, they have big contracts where they can take a few years to kind of, reevaluate what they want to do and those things. But I think his buyout at South Carolina was around $300,000 maybe. And so he was going to have to coach somewhere. And so Coach Bowden calls him, Tommy Bowden, offers him a job to come up to Clemson. And we're like, heck yeah, we're all excited about it. And a lot of my friends that are Carolina fans, they would ask me years later, like, how hard was that transition going from South Carolina to Clemson? I'm like, well, when they fire your dad, it's really easy, actually. And so I remember literally the day before it even came out. This hasn't even been a week after he got let go at South Carolina, and I'm playing in the Skiza All-Star game, for the league that I was playing in. And I show up there, and I'm wearing a Clemson hat. And again, I hadn't even been announced that he's going to Clemson yet. And one of the assistant coaches at the All-Star game was Steve Tannehill. So he sees me, because he's coaching at Chesterfield or something back there. So he's coaching the All-Star game. So he sees me get out wearing a Clemson hat, and he's like, come on, man. Like, are you doing this just out of spite? I'm like, oh, no. I said, Dad's going to Clemson. He's like, no way. I'm like, oh, yeah. Dad's taking the Clemson job with Tommy Bowden. And so little did we know. And then so Coach Bowden talks to me and offers me a chance to come walk on and, to play receiver. And again, I knew at a young age I wanted to be a college coach. We had Coach Bowden coming over from Tulane where they went undefeated. Rich Rodriguez was the OC with the spread offense coming over, going to be those OC. And I was excited that Dad was going to Clemson, so I basically decided at that point instead of going to Furman to come to Clemson to walk on, and then ended up meeting my wife Sarah during my freshman year here at Clemson, and now looking back, 22 years later, saying, who are we to kind of try to determine what's best for our own lives and our own choices. And, the good Lord kind of took something at the time, which was a lot of disappointment and kind of unknown of what's next, and then opened up the door that ended up being, one of the, best 20 years of our family's life. And so to me, whenever I say, I love Clemson and Clemson's special to me and my family, it's not just because of our experience here, but it's really because this was kind of that door that the good Lord opened for us when we thought, there was kind of a dead end on his career. And I got a chance to play for the team that my dad was coaching, and then to have a chance to come back and coach at the same, college team, Division I team with your dad. That's very rare in this profession. And then, my dad's incredible experience with Bobby Bowden, one of the best ever to do it as far as coaches and men. And then we get to kind of book in that with all the years that we got to spend with Coach Swinney, who is a modern day version of Bobby Bowden as far as how he loves his players, his coaches, just the investment that he puts into the program and really that family atmosphere. And so for us, kind of sitting back and with Dad, being done with his coaching career, with me kind of being in the middle trying to decide what I'm going to do here, moving forward, it's awesome to look back and see these kind of different decisions that led us to an awesome place and to a place where now Dad's retiring right here, and this is where we're going to raise, Sarah and I are going to raise our kids, and definitely gives a special meaning to the Clemson family.
Well, you got more than you wanted on that answer, didn't you? Yeah, well, Jeff was saying that, though, it reminded me of one of the scriptures in Proverbs said that man, he tries to plan his life, but God orders your steps. And so, we all have plans, but when you look back on where you are and then you look back on the past, you see, God's hand in all of this as he ordered every one of those moves and every one of those steps. And the success that you're having maybe at that level wouldn't have happened had you not gone through all these adversities and things that you thought, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? So it's just another good reminder, just keep on keeping on, keep the main thing, and, let's, as Dabo likes to say, let's win today, win the day. And if you do, I just have that kind of faith that, God takes care of you. Doesn't mean that it's not going to be rough, not going to be a little challenging for you along the way, but I think the main thing is you keep the faith and look up. Don't always be caught like coaches can easily do, looking out into the great fan bases and all like that, because they're with you win or tie.
Well, I can't tell y'all how much I appreciate y'all sitting down with me. And when I was coming up as a youngster and getting into the journalism business, wanting to do this for a living, I would look at Florida State, that dynasty, and I'm thinking, man, how cool would that be to have a window into that, as a sports writer. And, what we got to see at Clemson, that I basically, as we're correlating the two, got to see the same thing, essentially, and I never took it lightly. And there were so many nights, the Louisville night in 2016, or obviously the national championship nights, the semifinal nights, where I'd be done with work at like 2 or 3 in the morning in an airport somewhere or driving home from Death Valley going, I can't believe I just got to write about that. And so I'll always treasure those moments, and, just one of the great college football stories in history, and y'all were a part of it. And so just really grateful that y'all sat down with me.
Been a pleasure, Larry.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. You've always done a good job in covering sports, and especially Clemson, because my experience with you from, I guess, the days of a writer down at the Post and Courier all the way up to where you do a wonderful job. And I have learned to really respect and appreciate y'all's work. And, it can be challenging for y'all at times too, but I think you do you're a stand-up guy and do a great job.
Well, you've taught me some lessons too.
Well,
20 years ago, tearing into me for something that I deserved.
I remember a few little come to Jesus meetings with you, but hey, that's all. We all make little mistakes, and sometimes we base things on rather than first first experience, first account experience on what you hear, what you say. I won't be the first to break this or break that, but hey, that's all in the past. We all learn from it and move on. Yeah, good.
Thank y'all so much.
You bet.
Thank you.
Awesome stuff there. I want to thank Jeff Scott for coming up with that idea. And again, it was a true pleasure to unearth a lot of the history with both of those gentlemen. Appreciate the support of our sponsors for continuing to make this happen after all these years. And, of course, thanks to every one of you for hitting that play button. Really appreciate it. Cheers.